All right, with us today on the Monday, we have the Athletics' Adam Crafton and also Manchester United writer Laurie Whitwell. Right, Manchester United winning away at Aston Villa. It's not an easy place to go to. Fourth successive win, I should say, for Man United. Their best run of the season. How convinced are we by this resurgence? Let's go for the voice of pragmatism. Adam Crafton.
Uh, well, it's better. The results are better. They haven't won against a top nine team away from home, I think, in the entirety of Erik Ten Hag's reign. Is that right, Laurie?
Yep.
Um, you have to take it as progress. The striker that they signed for a lot of money in the summer, Rasmus Højlund, has started scoring goals. So that's definitely progress. They've got some players back from injury, but now some players are sort of falling away with injury again. But they're starting to look like some sort of team. And I think there's always a bit more promise when you have young players who are performing well. So when you see Højlund and Garnacho and Mainu, I think they've sort of brought a bit of life and direction and some sort of direction towards the future. At the same time, they're still sixth. They're still 6 points behind Tottenham. I think it would be, I know it's still sort of just over halfway through the season, but it feels like Tottenham have been at least the fourth best team in the league this season. So I think United still have a lot to do to recover that. Fifth place may be enough. So I think, look, I mean, it's a bit better. You have to balance it by saying Villa, it's probably the best time to play Villa compared to the first half of the season where they were, their home record has been pretty unbelievable for a year or so. They've now lost against Chelsea and Newcastle and Man United. And Villa was still the better team, I thought, for most of the game. Yes, they made better chances. So, yeah, results are better. Performances, I think, had to be better, when you set it against some of the ones in the first half of the season, but still kind of a lot of kind of confusion over, what Manchester United looked like at the start of the 2024-25 season.
Yeah, and they're scoring again, Laurie, though. 13 goals scored in 4 games. I mean, it's not bad. And as Adam pointed out, Højlund, finally, this jewel that was brought into Manchester United to provide goals is actually doing the business.
I thought it was a really sharp finish as well. On reflection, it looks simple enough, right? Live in the first instant, but actually he puts it through Emi Martinez's legs. He takes his time with it, doesn't sort of rush it, which is perhaps easy to do from 2 yards out. You should be scoring those ones, but he also sort of seemed to be in the right place for it. I do wonder if it was a very much a set piece routine from the training ground. Harry Maguire, get your head on it. I mean, it's quite simple, isn't it? But yeah, it worked in that moment. And I think Højlund, 5 games in a row, he scored in the Premier League now. So I think that's a really positive sign of what he can produce when he has got the ball at his feet. I think players haven't been looking to pass to him enough prior to this point. He also came into the club with a bit of a back injury and didn't have a proper pre-season with Atalanta, didn't have any, really with Man United. So that was always something that was going to take a bit of time to overcome. And then also just getting used to the Premier League, the speed of it. He blitzed the Champions League to begin with. So obviously that, he's had a bit of experience with European football before. So that perhaps shows that wasn't too much of a step up for him. But yeah, the Premier League is just a different rhythm, isn't it? A different kind of defenders that you come up against. The speed of it is frenetic. I mean, last night at Villa Park, it was chaotic for the most part, and that's where Villa seemed to thrive, in those moments of high intensity, overwhelming teams. I mean, that's how they beat Man City. So I do totally take Adam's point on board that it does have to be a little bit guarded, the enthusiasm around United, because there's a fragility to their team and how they play, particularly if you take out someone like Luke Shaw. I think that's a real big blow, and he came off at halftime as a precaution. But then again, there is also, it seems, a resilience now about United, a bit more grit. I don't know if that's to do with the change in ownership with INEOS coming in and their players having a bit more sense of purpose about what they're doing, or whether it's just a case of them actually pulling themselves together and thinking, come on, we need to at least work as hard as the opposition to get results in this league.
Yeah, I want to talk about INEOS a little later on. 10 points from 4 games in the Premier League since the turn of the new year. I want to say, is it realistic to say the Champions League hopes are still alive for Manchester United? Real talk. Because you said Tottenham have technically been the fourth best team, realistically in the league so far.
Yeah, I mean, they've got what, 14 games left, and it's
Mm.
6 points to recover against teams that, they're not teams that are going to win every match, Tottenham and Aston Villa.
Mm.
So, I would think if Man United win 11 of those games, they would get top four. Whether they're capable of doing that, I'm not sure. They've still got to go to Man City. Yeah, so still got to play Arsenal. Still got to go to Brighton. So I think United probably do need to win 10 or 11 games. But the upside I think that they have at the moment is they do have players back fit. They do have basically one game a week for most of the season
Mm.
because they're out of Europe.
Mm.
So I think that plays into their hands. But also it may be okay to finish fifth. That's the other bit of this, that with the way
That's what
the
I've been
club,
clinging on to, Adam.
I think it's what Erik Ten Hag's clinging on to as well. Um, and everyone who counts, the money at Manchester United.
Yes.
So Aston Villa, the way they're dropping points at the moment, I mean, that could be surmountable in the space of 2 or 3 weeks, right? The way that they're going. So I think it's quite open, to be honest. If it's fifth place, I think if it's fourth, I think that's more difficult. Tottenham, I think, are a far better side in terms of their ability to just get over the line. So, but yeah, I mean, certainly United shouldn't be let off the hook in the sense of they're 6 points off with 14 games to go when they've got a squad that's worth 1 billion.
Mm. I want to talk about Scott McTominay, and I didn't think I'd be starting this podcast and looking at Scott McTominay as Manchester United's top scorer in the Premier League with 7 goals, which is amazing. Super Scott. But Laurie, am I right in thinking that this is a player that was looking to be maybe shipped out over the summer, him and Maguire together, and now really is the one showing the grit in the dying minutes in games and popping up with very, very important goals for Manchester United this season?
Yeah, I mean, both of those players had really fascinating arcs
Mm.
at United generally, but also particularly this season since last summer, because yeah, both were available. I think Maguire was more of one that United were perhaps looking to sell because he wasn't in the team, and maybe they could have reinvested the money. And West Ham made a bid that they accepted, £30 million, and it just came down to the fact that Harry Maguire had a good contract at United, and that needed to be sorted out before he was going to move to West Ham. And also, I think really deep down, he probably just wanted to stay at United and felt that he would actually have this opportunity to come back into the team and do what he's doing right now. But your question was about Scott McTominay. United's price for him was higher, was something like 40 million plus. I don't think they were ever really looking to. They know that with financial fair play, PSR, it's important to get money in, but I don't think they were sort of showing McTominay the door just purely because, as Ten Hag touched on last night, the kind of presence that he has around the place is essential for what Ten Hag's trying to do, because he is, that disciplinarian. He wants players that are kind of committed in training every day, that don't mind doing the tasks that he sets them out to do. And a really interesting quote I thought after the game was him saying that McTominay is ready for 1 minute or ready for 90 minutes. And the kind of sense that he was saying was that this is a rare thing in modern football, where you've got players that kind of just want to be the starter every week. And if they're not, then they're going to get the hump. McTominay clearly, in this specified role for United, is dangerous. He scored 7 goals this season. They've been worth 12 points to United. So every single time he's scored, it's kind of had an influence on the game. And I think that's a little bit to do with United not being great at scoring goals and not winning matches by 3-4 goals. But at the same time, it still takes a certain skill to produce in these really tense moments. I mean, last night, it's a great cross from Diogo Dalot, but it does require a good header from McTominay. And if you snatch at that, you could easily miss it. So I think Ten Hag's recognised that he does provide those qualities, breaking into the box, kind of supporting Højlund. Sometimes they do look like they're kind of in the same areas, and it maybe is a bit confusing, and Højlund needs a bit more space on his own. But actually, last night, it meant that Villa's defenders had 2 strikers basically to occupy, and they didn't get it quite right, and McTominay benefited from it. But I think, yeah, Ten Hag seems to really admire McTominay as a person and as a player, and then in these specific moments, sending him on as a substitute, he's going to go in, all guns blazing and try and make a difference.
It's like it's like he's finally realised McTominay isn't actually the player that he thought he was. So when Ten Hag first came in, if you remember, he was ahead of Casemiro for the first few weeks. Casemiro was at the club as a holding number 6, and that's kind of where Solskjaer seemed to see him, and Mourinho seemed to see him for quite a while. And I think it's probably his form for Scotland, where he plays a bit more advanced and has been getting into the box, that's kind of made Ten Hag, often in very, very desperate moments, say to McTominay, all right, just get in the box and let's see what happens, right?
Brentford was a
worked.
perfect crystallization of that, because it was, 1-0 down, 90th minute, get in the box. And Maguire was a part of that. Maguire won the knock-on for one of McTominay's, I think, the winning goal. So, yeah, pragmatic. He did it start of last season, his first season, when, they obviously had got blitzed at Brentford. Go long, De Gea, with your goal kicks. He's clearly done it this season with McTominay. Sorry, I know I cut across you there, Adam, but I'm just really, this kind of stuff gets me really excited.
No, but it's interesting, because I think as a deeper midfielder, I think he's a massive problem for the team, McTominay.
In terms of build-up and passing.
In terms of build-up, I don't think he's very good on the half turn. I don't think his vision is particularly good. I don't think he's that good actually at tracking runners. Right, in terms, you look at the way United conceded against Nottingham Forest, where it was one of those cutbacks. He's not tracked Gibbs White, so I don't think he kind of fits many of the aspects of the game that you really want from a really top level 6 or 8. But in this kind of, it almost reminds me of what Van Gaal had when he was, he had this vision of kind of.
You're going to say, go on, say
I'm going to say McFellaini, because that is what he reminds me of at the moment. Yeah. That he is almost simultaneously like a bit of a problem, but also a massive solution. Because I think Ten Hag, in his ideal world, I know he's spoken about making Man United the best transition team in the world and all of this kind of thing. But I think like an ideal world, Ten Hag would want a team that builds up through the thirds from the goalkeeper, that plays like his Ajax team did. But McTominay's not built for that. And it's a bit like when Van Gaal had Fellaini, and Van Gaal probably wanted to play really possession football, and it ended up that he had his best success with Ashley Young crossing it for Marouane Fellaini to head it. And there are echoes of that at the moment. It'll be really interesting to see what they do in the summer with McTominay, because I think his value is probably being quite well protected by the impact he's having. But if you're signing him for another team, what are you signing him as? Are you signing him as this kind of, I don't know, almost like he was basically playing as a front man yesterday when he came on. He was that high up the pitch, and actually the two of them from a distance look quite similar, Højlund and McTominay. I mean, when the goal went in, I was like, oh my God, Højlund scored another one.
Both blonde and both really stacked.
yeah. Sort of these two kind of blondish forwards.
Well, he actually, when you look at the table that he's alongside with, players that have scored goals that have been meaningful for their teams, it's all strikers. Obviously it's Haaland, it's Son, it's Richarlison, it's Dominic Solanke.
So he's 100 million, right?
Well, there we go. If you're in that bracket, and just one really quick thing on the whole position point, he actually came through at United as a kind of number 10, as a more advanced player. So Solskjaer, or it was Jose Mourinho, wasn't it, that really put him as a number 6, basically told him, don't run, do this thing that I want you to do, because it was a kind of riposte to Paul Pogba, him not having control of him. But McTominay did it diligently. Solskjaer kind of continued that. But I think you're right in that maybe Ten Hag's realised that actually he's a different player.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to INEOS. And I know you mentioned it earlier, Laurie. Adam, I'm just thinking about what kind of impact in INEOS, especially sort of hovering over what's happening right now, what kind of impact that's having on what's happening on the pitch. And I think back in autumn, when analysing Manchester United, you said, it seemed a state of uncertainty with a number of interim people in certain roles. Has that investment led, I guess, to a bit more clarity behind the scenes? So now we're seeing a bit more clarity, weirdly, on the field as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy jump to make, isn't it? From the moment, what was it? The first game under Ratcliffe was the Aston Villa game where United came from 2-0 down and won 3-2. And kind of since then, apart from a defeat at Nottingham Forest, it's been pretty good from United. And it's kind of easy to make that connection that all of a sudden, there's a bit more stability, there's a bit more direction. I think maybe it's focused, Erik, not just the players, but Ten Hag a little bit as well, because, Ten Hag was under a lot of pressure, and maybe he's had to also kind of step up his game a little bit. I think everyone at the club probably feels as though they are under the microscope, right? As Man United look to make sense of what their future is and how that's all going to shake out. I think it was probably good that everyone knew quite early nothing was going to happen in January, really. So there was no kind of instability that could come with that. But it's not just INEOS, right? It's corresponded with Casemiro coming back into the team, Rashford coming back into the team. After everything that happened with the Newport situation, and Luke Shaw's come back, and I think that's helped. Hopefully that injury is not significant. The goalkeeper looks a bit more settled compared to the first couple of moments. I think he still drives me mad a little bit with how slow he plays out at times. Really intelligent people keep telling me that this is all about like baiting the press, and it means Man United are going to play round people and score amazing goals from it. Yet to see those goals, but that's
there was
fine.
a funny moment.
Give it time, lad. Come on.
There's a funny moment last night where he literally came like about 30 yards out and just waited for ages, and everyone was like, "Is this going to be kicked?" And then he just ended up kicking it to Bruno, who was like trying to make a dart as a last man, and it just went nowhere. Aston Villa got it and they attacked.
Yeah, but he is he's making saves, and that is more important as well. So, but just in terms of the whole INEOS thing, I think it has given certainly a bit more energy and purpose to the whole place. And it's always unclear, I think, with football clubs, how much can something like that really filter through to, multi-million-pound footballers who are kind of heads in the clouds a little bit. Does all this stuff really matter? I think what it does is it eliminates an excuse. I think previously they might be able to say, oh, all this stuff's going on with the ownership and it's unsettled and it's unclear where the club's going. Well, now actually, you've had Dave Brailsford go in and speak to the players. Yeah, it gives a sense of direction, a sense of unity, a sense of better things to come. But I think all of that is underpinned by these young players, the Mainu, Højlund, Garnacho, that because they are breathing energy and intensity and talent into it, I think it almost says to some of those older guys who are very established, well, come on then. You're meant to be the ones who
leading the way
and leading. Come and join the fun, kind of thing. And I think some of them are.
Laurie, what do you think what kind of effect do you think this will have on players like McTominay or the Maguires of this world, for instance? Do you see these kind of players fitting into this sort of mode of quote unquote excellence, moving on from Manchester United under the INEOS group?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. What happens with guys like that? I mean, and for all the talk of world class or best in class, there obviously are pragmatic realisms about their individual player situations. So Maguire being on a good wage, or McTominay having I think a year left on his deal in the summer, potential with an additional one. So these are situations that they're going to have to look at and boil down to what makes the most business sense as well as sporting excellence. But I do think that players like Maguire and McTominay have a future because of the way they've shown resilience and grit in tough times. And maybe they're not ideal for exactly what someone like Erik Ten Hag would want or whatever INEOS might think is how United should play. But I don't think that discounts them as having really important roles to play. There's many different ways to win football matches, and when United had their glory years, there was many different types of players that played for Sir Alex Ferguson. I do just think as well, touching on Adam's point, that whilst players are definitely in their own worlds, and certainly at this level where the money kind of almost incubates you from any trauma to a degree in your sporting life. I do think that having an impetus now has galvanized some of the players. I do think that, and it's not intangible because you've got someone like Sir Dave Brailsford there actually having these meetings face to face, rather than Joel Glazer over in Florida or Washington, and okay, he says this, he's involved in this, but we haven't ever seen or heard from him. Okay, wow, here's a guy who genuinely does have I know he's not the owner as such, but he's basically Jim Ratcliffe's right hand man. He's got the power, he's got authority to do stuff. So he's there actually addressing us with a background, and I know there's controversy about what happened with Team Sky and British Cycling, but he has got a track record of winning medals at that level. And I think they are kind of transferable, those approaches. So I think that's what is perhaps different than other situations where a club has been taken over, and we can kind of say that these players have responded to that.
Adam, you alluded to Erik Ten Hag earlier when you were speaking, and I do think about what you're talking about as well in terms of that there are no excuses now, or there are less excuses now for Manchester United. Does this then proverbially shoot a rocket up his backside in a weird way? I know obviously there's been backing of the manager and publicly, but You have to think this would have a shift in mentality to be like, do you know what? Yeah, I mean, I can't blame the regime anymore. I actually have to now start performing on the field if I'm to hold on to my job.
Yeah, and also the thing to remember is I think if Ten Hag is to stay, which I don't think is impossible at all,
Mm,
um, he is going to have to accept that his role is going to be far more about being a head coach than being
mm,
head coach, manager, head of recruitment, head of medical, head of
mm,
performance, head of PR, head of, all different aspects
mm,
that the club come across, which it's felt at times like he's been all of those things at once over the past year or so. I think what INEOS are trying to do is it's not a derogatory thing. I think it is we want to we want the head coach to be able to coach, right? We want
mm,
to liberate them really from those responsibilities, lighten those loads, and that means getting the people who are best in class in performance and medical and recruitment and scouting, so that we aren't relying on what may be a slightly more limited skill set for Ten Hag in terms of recruitment, which is basically these are the players I've coached or have come across. That's based on the evidence of who United have recruited. Um, and have that as a more club-led enterprise, knowing that the head coach may not stay, right? Like that's how
mm,
most of these clubs work. The ideal situation is you get something like Klopp or Guardiola where they do stay for 8 or 9 years, and they have a say into who's recruited and it fits into a style of play. But if not, you do need, you can't have situations where you have a manager's pick going from one manager to the next, and each time that being the case. So I think that's the likely situation. That's what INEOS are trying to do at the moment, and
mm,
therefore it's kind of incumbent on Ten Hag over the next few months to show, particularly with the team out of Europe, where he's got a lot more time on the training pitch, to
mm,
show that he can coach a team and get performances and get a style and patterns. Even yesterday, watching Aston Villa play Man United, I still thought Villa looks the better coach side, right? I still thought they had, the attacking patterns and looked a bit more dangerous and more kind of consistency and chance creation and all those different
mm,
things. I know lots of, for Man United fans who went to that game away from home at Villa Park, who saw a last minute winner, you're not going to
mm.
care about that. But actually, in terms of the broader picture of where Man United under Ten Hag is going, I think that's something he really has to demonstrate, because he managed to show it last year. There were patterns and a kind of a style of play that started to come in, but really since probably they lost at Liverpool 7-0 in kind of March last year, you've not really seen it. So it may be a bit of confidence, it may be more time on the coaching side of
Yeah.
it.
Do you buy that, Laurie? This gives him a bit more time to focus on the coaching as opposed to all the other distractions that he's had to sort of try and piece together whilst he's had this quite turbulent, I'll say, moment at Manchester United.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, having no European football, it wouldn't have been in the plan for sure.
Mm,
Certainly not for the bean counters, and certainly not for the fans. That group that they had in the Champions League, they should have got through that. But it does provide a bit of space for United to take a breath, and with it being quite a few young players that they've got, Rasmus Højlund, Alejandro Garnacho, Kobbie Mainoo, actually giving them room to make mistakes on the training pitch and kind of get an understanding. I think that could be really important, actually. And I think Ten Hag, will hope that that's how the time is spent. But yeah, on Adam's point about the sort of patterns of play and things like that, and Villa, they are a very well coached team. You can tell that. I do think that still Ten Hag, and he spent a lot of money, or the club have spent a lot of
mm,
money under his managerialship. I don't think he's necessarily got the players in certain positions that he would actually want. So in the end, you've got Martinez being out is a huge blow, because it does affect what Andre Onana can then do building out from the back. Do the players that are there at the moment in the back line really want the ball in those pressured
mm,
situations like Martinez would?
Mhm.
I don't know. Casemiro was obviously a kind of late fix in that window to the Frenkie de Jong situation. They're different players. Still hasn't got that number 6. Even Kobbie Mainoo, I think he's really, really promising, but he's an 18-year-old. You don't really want to have to
mm,
rely on him to do that kind of role. And again, he's another player that actually coming through the academy was played at centre forward and played as a wide player. So it's
mm,
not like he's been doing this role for years and years and years. So I do feel like there should be some sort of latitude given for the players that Ten Hag is able to pick to then sort of try and do his style of play. Notwithstanding, there are some moments in the final third where you're thinking, players are clearly taking it upon themselves to have a run and a shot. Garnacho did it a couple of times, Rashford did it a couple of times. Maybe that's what Ten Hag's asked them for. Maybe that's them just wanting to flex their muscles a little bit and get on the score sheet if they can. But I do think that's probably a fair criticism that you can sort of go at Ten Hag about.
If he can just sort of get that final part of his game right.
What? Finishing,
the final ball. There's been a few moments in the past few weeks where he's had shots that have just gone wide, like that, where it opens up. Let's say darted past about 4 players and then curled it just wide. It feels like he's done that 3 or 4 times over the past month or so. And you feel like if the penny drops with him in that way, and you're setting him a really high bar there. He's 18, 19 himself, and he's already playing at a really high level. But if he can just get that consistency in the final third, United have a player there that could do anything really. So I think that's exciting, and I think Højlund's exciting. Watch Højlund, and even when he wasn't scoring in the Premier League, he wasn't playing badly, right?
And the personality, the character that he's got is remarkable, really, for the age that he is. I guess it's that sort of Danish Scandinavian approach, liberal sort of upbringing. Peter Schmeichel spoke about that in the Sunday Times piece on him at the weekend. But you can just see how much he loves playing for United. He wanted to play for United above all other clubs.
Yeah, he's like that. He's like that kind of gap year student in a club that's just having like almost too much of a good time all the time. Right, like he is just absolutely loving it.
You're thinking back to your own gap year, aren't you?
I literally just got wind of Adam out clubbing like in his youth. Just loving it. I want to be out so much.
A couple of years ago it was, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not that old.
We've basically, you've talked about some really interesting young players actually, and we spoke about McTominay and also Maguire as well. And I just want to pick up on quick one in terms of how United are going to move forward with this squad, because Erik Ten Hag said, especially around building a foundation for young players, he says we're now building a team that can really offer a foundation for young players to come in. We build the foundation that you can add quality players to the squad and also take the team to the next level. And look, Man United have always been able to include young players in their squad, but is that what we are now seeing now? And don't get me wrong, it's only a few games, but does it feel as if these young players are here to stay, but also flourish to develop in the next 2-3 years, where we're going to see them actually leading Manchester United to the next level?
We have this question all the time, don't we? But I really do feel like with Mainu, Garnacho and Højlund, that those 3 have got the quality and I think the personalities as well. I mean, certainly Mainu is very calm, very intelligent, learns really well. Garnacho was probably one that I thought, is he going to be too flashy, too kind of, I am the guy, too egotistical, I suppose, because he's definitely got that aura about him. But I actually have come to think that and from watching his performances, he is taking on board advice and he is learning and he is developing, becoming more of an all-round forward. And he's become a father at 18, so he's clearly got a sense of grounding in his life. He's very settled with his family. So I do think that maybe I got that wrong, or maybe he's learned. And then Højlund, as I've touched on, I think he's got a really, really strong character. So I think those 3 are some elite talent that you can build a team around. And then if you can add a few more, it's difficult. You don't want to throw a young player into a mix, particularly as it has been at United, where it's been sort of turmoil it always seems very close to plunging into that kind of territory. But I do feel that with those guys there, you need the right personalities. I mean, that was what the class of '92 were given when they came through. They had serious professionals to kind of learn from and get a bit of roasting from, to be honest. It was a hard environment to come into. So I think if you can kind of cultivate that at United, that's going to be, hugely beneficial to the club.
Yeah, was it Ten Hag that said, oh, go on, Adam.
So sorry, it reminds me a little bit of when Arsenal started building a team around, Saka and Martinelli, and it was Smith Rowe, wasn't it, at the time, who was coming into the team. It's almost like the wrong way round. Normally you would want a kind of a base of really solid first team players, and then you kind of add a sprinkle of young players that you introduce in slowly to it, and a bit like maybe Liverpool are doing with Conor Bradley, or Man United did with the class of '92. this is not the way round that you'd want it, right? That you have kind of the kid setting the standards, and then you're trying to add the experience to it. But it's worked for Arsenal, right? That way, like it kind of gave them somewhere to go off, and then build from there. So I don't think it necessarily means it's wrong. It's just not the way that we've kind of seen it historically.
Yeah, does he also? I mean, I think it was Ten Hag who was saying he feels like Mainoo's progression will be accelerated by playing side by side with Casemiro. Do you buy that argument? Is Casemiro at that optimum? I mean, he's a good player, but his United experience
I mean,
so far
it'll mean
can
that
be seen as hit or miss.
It'll develop his physicality, and it'll have to do two people's running for the next 6 months. I felt sorry for. I kind of feel sorry for both of them because, I mean, Laurie, you watch them every week, every week in person. I sort of see them much more on TV, but it always looks to me as though if you just put Mainoo next to Casemiro, that it would kind of just make Casemiro's life a hell of a lot easier. Because at the moment he has Mainoo kind of that little bit more advanced, almost as an 8, and Fernandes quite high as well as an 8. And it means there's like this huge space across midfield that I think it would make, I think even Rodri would struggle a bit with the space that is left. And you saw Jacob Ramsey yesterday really, really cutting across that. But clearly Ten Hag is very wedded to this setup. He doesn't seem to want to change it at all.
I think because he's trying to get goals into his team. Obviously United have been one of the poorest scorers this season. So if you just have maybe two guys, so there's moments clearly where Mainoo goes forward in search of trying to affect the game in the final third. I just think maybe Casemiro, he definitely has been a victim of the system at times, but he also feels like he's not quite at that sharpness that he was last season. I mean, he actually got booked again against Villa, but unfortunately so this time. Because I was going to say,
unfairly,
it didn't really touch him. But in terms of Mainoo learning off him, I probably would say don't slide in as much as he seems to have done in England. I don't know where this has come from, but every single game there's like a kind of scissor tackle that kind of seems to get him booked. But to be fair, they've apparently got a really good relationship, Casemiro and Mainoo. Casemiro identified Mainoo early on as someone that was, really good to perhaps cultivate and bring on. It was just unfortunate that in pre-season they played 6 minutes together against Real Madrid. Then Mainoo got injured and he was out for such a long time. Then Casemiro was injured. So this is only the, fourth maybe game that they've started together. So that should develop in terms of what Adam's saying. Maybe in time, Casemiro will just say to Mainoo, please just stay here next to me and we'll be okay.
All right. Let's move on to, I want to pick up again on sort of this Champions League push again. And, we talked about, the stream of successive wins that Manchester United are currently on. Let's look ahead to what look like some pretty tricky fixtures. And we always say, are the next fixtures favourable for Manchester United? I don't know what favourable fixtures are in the Premier League anymore, really. Luton away, Fulham at home, Nottingham Forest away in the FA Cup. But there's still that big game against Manchester City on the 3rd of March away at City. We were talking about this earlier, that, the pressure's really on Manchester City to perform in that game if they're gunning for their 4th Premier League title. But also, you want to see a Manchester United that can hold their local rivals toe-to-toe, Laurie.
Yeah, I mean, they have had good success at the Etihad, in sort of, certainly under the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And, they've been able to beat City under Erik Ten Hag at Old Trafford. But it has been more often than not sort of soaking up the pressure and then hitting on the counter. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's just always going to be the way against City as long as Pep Guardiola is manager for United. I don't know if they'll ever, in the intervening years, be able to kind of bridge that gap. I mean, I suppose at Old Trafford, to be fair, under Ten Hag, they did go a bit more front-footed and they came from behind in that game as well. So that was kind of a pretty startling turnaround, given you just think that City, as soon as they get in the lead, they're going to strangle the life out of you. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting occasion because, I mean, if they can come away from that with a positive result of any kind, then that does really change the perspective on this season for Ten Hag. But you do sort of worry from a United perspective that with De Bruyne back, with John Stones back, with Phil Foden firing, with Erling Haaland back, whether they're going to get another and it was a chastening experience for United under Ten Hag at the Etihad in their first season. So he has to do much better than that this time.
Home form as well, I think, is all I want to finish on this, really, and how important it is to really get that home form really solid at Old Trafford. Definitely lost quite a few key games at Old Trafford this season, but having Old Trafford as a fortress, Adam, to keep that momentum going, super important.
Yeah, I mean, it's not been a fortress at all, right? I mean, they've had some pretty appalling days there.
Sandcastle.
Crumbling sandcastle.
Sandcastle in the rain.
Keep filling it with more sand.
Yeah. You just don't. The problem they have is they don't control games. So those home games therefore become almost, because the incentive is always there at home to kind of push forward. It means they leave big gaps going the other way. But I mean, you look over the next few games, I think they've got Luton and Fulham and Everton, and then you have that City game in the middle of that. So I think it's a pretty good opportunity for them to pick up points. I don't think they should focus. I mean, it sounds mad not to focus too much on the City game, but just win the games you're expected to win, and then take it from there. I think even that Luton game next week away from home won't be easy, right? We've seen that with the way that Liverpool struggled there, and Arsenal, and I think Man City went a goal down there as well. So it's very much the kind of banter era Man United kind of day that you could envisage being, complex for them. But at the same time, I do have the sense with them at the moment that I don't want to sort of jinx them, but you have the sense that they're just sort of building a little bit of momentum. So I would think they might be okay at Luton, which feels like a really low bar. To
and then lose at home at Everton.
With. Yeah, and okay at home to Everton as well. So yeah, I think Man United are improving to the extent they'll win at Luton is as positive as I'm prepared to go.
That's the headline.
And Man United's fans just a bit sort of used to sort of false dawns, because I think this time last season you were at Wembley after the Carabao Cup final. That was the revolution. It was gonna kick off from here. Erik Ten Hag, trophy in hand. Let's have it.
Well, I remember I've sort of wrote that silverware basically helps a manager get endorsement for his method. So, it had, he'd broken a few eggs, but, the Carabao Cup showed that an omelette could be made. I still think he's had, some, I don't know, some friction with certain players on certain aspects of his approach. But I mean, I think that still stands as like a good afternoon for United fans to look back on. I mean, I had family members there and they were buzzing, at the end of it. So again, maybe it's a low bar considering the history of United and the places that they've won trophies at previously. But I still think it was a positive season for Ten Hag, that one, and maybe that should still be factored into the equation when we're coming to this part of the season, and then with the INEOS view of things, what are they going to think? I still think ultimately football, is about silverware, and he did do his job there, and they're still in the FA Cup, they could win that. So there's a chance that this could have a nice sheen at the end of the season, but it feels like quite a pivotal second half for United and for Ten Hag in particular.
He could have a really, I think he needs one or two really big days before now and the end of the season. And that might be something daft like winning at Man City. It might be something that matters to the fans a lot. Like, when by the time they play Liverpool, that might be a game that could knock Liverpool out of the title race or something like that. And I know that's a pretty low bar for Man United fans to have in terms of stopping Liverpool achieve things. But actually, if he was to have a day like that, or even when they play Arsenal later in the season as well, I think those are the kind of results that will start to build a bit of confidence that actually he's capable of really competing as a top manager.
I tell you what, I would very much like if Manchester United stopped both Liverpool and Manchester City winning the Premier League, and Arsenal just gallop straight into the middle for the first time. Arsenal fans will love Man United fans. Anyway, let's leave it there, gents. Adam, Laurie, appreciate your time. Do not forget to rate and review the podcast, and we'll be back for another episode tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, click subscribe for more content like this. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season to bring you the inside track to the biggest stories in football. If you'd like to listen to the full episodes for free, search the Athletic Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.